I really wanted to share this recipe with you while the stone fruits are in season. But you know what? You can use any fruit. You can use tin pineapple circles with a little glacé cherry in the middle, which would make it a pineapple upside down cake. Or you could use fresh pears or any soft fruit. If you're using apples, I suggest to cook them down first. A viewer actually told me about this recipe, and so I had to track it down. It's in this edition of the Epicurean magazine, which is about 20 to 30 years old, and I'll leave that original one on the website so you can have a look at it as well. And you know what? It's a straight one-to-one swap for gluten-free flour. Works perfectly. So I have a 23 centimetre springform pan here, which I've just greased with a bit of butter and lined the bottom with a bit of baking paper, and also just greased over it a little. And here I have 100 grams of very soft butter and 100 grams of brown sugar. And I'm just going to mix these well together. And a spoon will work better than a spatula. And you can use like a handheld beater to do this if you like, but if your butter's really soft, it doesn't take long. Now I put this on the bottom of the tin. And using the back of the spoon, I just spread it evenly across the bottom on the piece of baking paper. And now I prepare the fruit. And I've got some white nectarines and yellow nectarines here. I've also got 3 plums or 4 plums. And I basically just put as much as I can on the bottom. Because I'm always chopping onions, I like to put a piece of baking paper on the bottom before I cut the fruit, because I'm one of 5 children and my mum was a wonderful cook. But one thing I have a memory of, and we laugh about it together now, is the watermelon always had a faint onion taste. And I'm just slicing these into pieces like that. This is the yellow nectarine. And I leave the skin on. You can take the skin off if you want. And these I save for me for later. Apricots would be so delicious in this, but unfortunately they're not cheap at the moment. 2 yellow nectarines, 2 white nectarines, and 4 little blood plums. I think that should be ample. Now, completely not necessary, but the recipe does say 50 grams of unsalted macadamia nuts. Now, I've made this cake a few times without the nuts, but you know, they do add that something special. And just roughly chopped, something like that. Then onto the base, just lay this fruit, and you can put it randomly any way you like, or you can do it decoratively. I am such a heavy-handed cook, so I push this fruit to the limit. The fruit to me makes this cake. I've been making pineapple upside down cakes for years, and being the heavy-handed cook I am, I used to always think, oh, there's not enough batter for the amount of pineapple. So, you know, a lot of times there I double the recipe, and then I came to the conclusion that this cake is absolutely delicious with just a bit of batter, because it really matches the quantity of the fruit, and every bite is delicious that way. Now that's a lot of fruit, and I'm really hoping this will turn out with all this fruit. I haven't quite put this much on before. Oh well, if it doesn't, I'll have to make it again. And then I get the macadamia nuts and just sprinkle some over there. Try and poke through some to the butter mixture so you can see it when they turn upside down. So at this point, before I move on to the batter, I preheat the oven to 180 degrees conventional. That's 160 degrees if you only have a fan, but I just use the conventional settings. Now there's only 30 grams of soft butter that goes into this, and 125 grams of caster sugar. Now the actual recipe says to put this in a food processor and process it for 5 minutes, but you know, I tried that, and for me it didn't work because the food processor, there wasn't enough butter to sugar ratio, and it sort of stuck to the bottom. And to be honest, this is not the traditional creaming of getting it light and fluffy. You just want the butter to coat all the sugar like a wet sand. So a minute should do it. And I'm just using a handheld mixer. The other ingredients that go in this now is 1 room temperature egg, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 3 tablespoons of sour cream. The recipe says light sour cream, but I just use heavy, and I use 3 big tablespoons. And give that a little stir until it's all incorporated. And it doesn't say to sift, but I sift everything. And that's 150 grams of all-purpose plain flour. In my case, gluten-free flour. And to that, add 1 teaspoon of baking powder. You can add a pinch of salt if you wish, but, well, it's minimal, but I use salted butter always in cooking. And just fold that in until the flour is mixed into the batter. Now this is a really thick batter, and it's meant to be that way. And there's not much of it, but you don't want to over mix it. And now I just sort of spoon this thick batter over the fruit. It's sort of like blobs. And using the back of a spoon again, I just spread it out. And sometimes it's helpful if you wet the back of the spoon if it's sticking a bit much. This seems to be working okay. So much fruit. Now this goes into the oven for 40 minutes or until a skewer, when poked in it, comes out clean. So that's been 40 minutes. What I forgot to mention before, that you need to put it on a tray because of the fruit juice, it will leak. And I'll just test it and a skewer comes out clean. Now before I take it out of the tin, I leave it for at least 5 minutes. Well, actually I'm going to leave it for 10 minutes because it's super hot. And I'll come back in 10 minutes and unmold it. It smells beautiful. And I'm just going to run my knife around the edge. Now, because I put so much fruit there, I know that it'll ooze out a little bit. Whoops. And because I put extra fruit on it, it was actually quite easy to get off. So yeah, you don't have to put as much fruit as I do. I'm going to let that cool down just for a little bit more before I slice into it. But I can't wait. The first time I ever made this, Mike and I ate the whole thing within 2 days. And actually on the first day, we just nearly ate it all. There was only a bit left each for the next day. So yum. A company called Ainsley gifted me some lovely fine bone china, and I always get a bit excited when I have an excuse to use it. They've provided a 30% off discount if anyone wants to check them out. I'll leave the link in the video description. Look at that. Just packed with fruit and pretty perfect with some nice cream. Whipped or runny, doesn't really matter. So beautiful. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy this recipe. I know it will be in my repertoire for a long time to come. Hopefully I'll see you again soon.